There are some things like when you develop, let's say, a predictive algorithm, or you're trying to get your system to scale to God knows how many users, and you want to do it linearly without kind of building that algorithm or coding it first and then sort of running it through, developing a system to test it initially in your own office, somehow to develop an emulator for what are you actually going to be testing, then actually finding a client that is friendly enough to actually to be a guinea pig for you, and then eventually releasing it into the wild and just still observing, what's actually happening with your system, and whether some of the things you could not potentially even encounter unless you actually test it in a real life environment. So from that point of view, just recording these trials and tribulations as you go through, actually that's and putting it probably like in the form of a diary, or if you put it in Jira or something like that, but essentially saying that there is an experiment going on and we're testing for certain criteria. So that will provide you the evidence that is needed, because unfortunately the regulators, they're actually evidence-based. So you have to provide them with something that they will actually say, yeah, we understand, and that's a document, and it has to be contemporaneous as well. So, and I think the more sort of you record, I think probably to step back from the IT world into the science world as we know it. In the past, scientists working in a lab would have a lab book. And in the lab book, they would actually
note everything down, right?
Note everything down.
Yes.
Nowadays, hardly anybody uses notebooks. They might use iPads and stuff like that. But you have to create an equivalent of that notebook, which essentially be primarily useful to yourself. And maybe if you're a researcher or a developer, if your boss comes to you and says, what have you been doing lately? You can actually kind of produce it and say, I've been working on this, I've been testing this, I've been testing something else. So essentially, imagine the regulator, or like from ATO or the industry, they're coming in and asking you. So if you can produce something like that, it's a gold standard.
Okay, so it's a journal basically of your activities throughout the process.
That's correct.
Okay.
A couple of areas that clients sometimes raise and want to know if there is R&D there. Like one area is often data migration is something where the software guidance specifically says it's not necessarily easily able to demonstrate that it's a core R&D activity. It might be supporting ongoing experimental activities, but data migration itself is probably not something that's a core R&D activity. However, if you develop a complex coding algorithm or a specific software program that enables you to do that faster, or for complex data formats, or there might be R&D in that. So there's those sorts of routine software development steps that in themselves aren't R&D, but if you're trying to do them differently or in a more complex or fast way, there may be R&D associated with that.
So if you took the perspective where you try and develop that potentially as a product for other people, and in that scenario, then that would have potentially more chance of being claimable?
If you're
not necessarily. So if you're going to develop that, if you developed an algorithm and then you said, all right, we could probably sell this to other people, so you're bringing a new product to the market, would that then help that claim?
If you're developing something that's quite innovative and different to what's been done before, then it's potentially going to have some R&D.